brief guided journey to meet the spirit of Amanita. Does that all sound good to you guys?
I'm gonna go back. I'll see you.
Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah.
So I'm actually going to pass out some of these caps, and I'd like each of you to take one, and you can just take it and hold it to your heart, or part of your body you might want like clarity or healing in. You're welcome to take a nibble of it. I wouldn't recommend eating the whole cap. But also too, if you don't feel comfortable with that, you could take it with you and like give it back to the earth or put it on an altar, something like that. So go ahead and pass these around, and just take one, and I'll take the other bag and start over here. They were dehydrated. Yeah, they weren't like heated past, they weren't heated past 140. So there is going to be some ibotenic acid in them, but if you're just taking a nibble, it's going to be very minuscule. Yep. And I'll explain everything about all that. Yep. Go ahead and settle into your body, get comfortable, allow your mind to rest and be here for a little while. Hey Maria, do you know if you're connected to my Bluetooth?
I'll check. I am not.
Okay.
Pardon me? Do you want some? Sure. Just a nibble.
Yeah, feel free to just hold it, or you can take a nibble if you want. If you're not feeling comfortable or called to take a nibble, just hold it to your heart or part of your body you might be asking for healing or clarity in. Thank you. Did everybody get a cap? All good? Alright, so go ahead and get comfortable, close your eyes. If you have a phone that's on, could you please put it on silent? If you have to have it on for emergencies, that's okay. Go ahead and settle into your body, taking a deep breath in through your nose, allowing any tension in your body to leave on an exhale. Closing the eyes, relaxing the shoulders, relaxing any part of our body that's still holding tension. With every exhale, finding more peace, allowing the mind to just be. We're going to go on a little journey and meet the spirit of Amanita. Start off on your journey walking through a field. You feel the blades of grass between your toes. You feel the gentle summer breeze turning to autumn through your clothes and your hair. little bit after noon and the sun is high. You walk through this field, you see a tree line, and maybe something in you is curious about this forest, this tree line, so you walk towards it. Just gently walking towards the woods as it beckons you in. And as you approach that tree line, you see maybe a little narrow walking path, a little foot trail that perks your interest. So you decide to walk along this trail. The first thing you notice is a lot of eastern white pine trees. All their needles have shedded and leave a very soft bed of needles. You walk on your feet. Flickers of sunlight filter through the tree canopy, tickling your eyes. Your eyes are adjusting to the darker parts of the forest. Hemlocks and birch populate the forest with the white pines. You notice little critters, little salamanders, slugs, little mushrooms. Feel a sense of calm, sense of ease. Maybe feels like time is kind of slowing down a little bit. As you walk deeper into the forest, time becomes slightly irrelevant. Maybe you don't know what brought you there with your mind, but something in your body was telling you. As you go deeper in, you begin to notice more mushrooms. And there's a little bright red one that sticks out, almost saying, "Hey, come here. I got something for you. Notice me. Do you see me?" As you approach this mushroom, you notice that it's almost like you saw something very big off in the distance that you thought was small. But as you approach this mushroom, you realize that it's actually towering over you. It's maybe 20 feet tall. You notice a little hole that turns into a doorway. And so, with your curious mind, you go inside of the stalk of this mushroom house, and you notice a little table in the middle of the room. And on that table is a little chest. So you open the chest, and you find something. And that will be unique for each of us. Whatever it is that you have been seeking has been seeking you. And all this is confirmation for that. So you stay for a little while, wondering if nightfall is coming. Seems timeless, but you know it surely has to be approaching evening. So you step outside of the mushroom house, bow to the mushroom, say thank you, and you make your way out of the forest, having gained something that you actually always had. The mushroom just helped you see it. And in a lot of ways, that's what Amanita is about. So that's the end of my speech. Thank you guys. See you later. But come back in your own time, in your own way. Back out of the forest and back into the here and now. Plant Cunning Conference. So thank you guys for joining. Thank you for going on that little journey. So I like to have us kind of meet the spirit of Amanita first and then get into all the heady stuff. So, yeah, does anybody want to briefly share anything that they experienced? Yeah.
I was late, so I just got to envision the table with the box in it. But in my box was a pink light, and I couldn't get away from it. And I wanted there to be something else there, but it's just a pink, shiny, sparkly princess light.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is something I've always had. Yeah.
Very
So,
cool.
yeah, it was a good, accurate meditation. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
mine was also a light, but yellow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a light too. It was red.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
I had an orb with lights in it, but I wouldn't
Oh.
necessarily say it was like necessarily a light.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I've actually never asked like what people see, so it's interesting that I decided to now, and they all have these orbs and lights, so that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Mine was a doll of myself.
Okay. Yeah. That's
It
pretty.
was a doll of myself.
Oh,
A doll of herself. Yeah.
Huh.
Just like representing me.
Yeah.
That's what I found.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah. Mine was like a reflective surface with like water.
Okay.
I wasn't super reflective.
Yeah.
I have a
Did it-
green key.
What's that?
A green key.
A green key.
Mine was a gold key.
Okay. All right. All right.
I had a rusty gold key.
Oh. Interesting. Rusty gold key. Okay.
I had a gold nugget.
There you go. Last year I did this guided meditation at the beginning of the speech I did, and there was a couple who already had been microdosing Amanita, and they were like, it was like they were tapped into the energy of Amanita, and I was tapped in, and they were like 3 steps ahead of me. Like they could see everything, and then I would say it, and I was just like, oh, okay, all right, there's something more happening here. So very cool. Thanks for sharing, everybody. So was everybody here at my speech last year? Or is this all new people? Okay, great. There's some repeated information, but I have adapted. So yeah, who is familiar with Amanita Muscaria? Okay.
I've taken their tincture.
Yeah. And how many people have like worked with it, taken it? So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Yeah. And so, yeah, we're you know, kind of limited on time on like, you know, I like to do this talk because it kind of covers a lot of everything. And there's a lot of misinformation about Amanita, but if you were to ask like, you know, 100 people to draw a mushroom, most of them would maybe draw something that looked like this mushroom, but then you ask them what's it about, and they may not know, or they may say, oh, it's poisonous or toxic and you know, hallucinogenic, and it's like, yes, all of the above and ... So we're gonna get into that ... here. So I call my talk now From Myth to Medicine, because I work with Amanita Muscaria professionally and personally. I have like thousands of clients I work with on a regular basis who are taking Amanita for various purposes. And so whenever it's properly dosed and properly prepared, it can be incredibly therapeutic. Whenever it's improperly dosed or improperly prepared, it could have, you know, very negative results. And I've experienced all ends of the spectrum myself personally, because I am a true psychonaut and I want to just understand everything about. And I haven't gone deeper with anything like I have with Amanita. So I like to share my experiences so people can reap from that and avoid the negative consequences of ill preparation. So this mushroom is really, in a lot of ways, the greatest symbol of occult knowledge, because it's hidden in plain sight. It grows on almost every single continent on the earth. It's the mushroom emoji on your phone. It's found in Super Mario and Alice in Wonderland, in pop culture. But again, not many people know about you know, really what the properties are and the healing benefits. So I just wanted to give a little bit of my, can anybody see this at all? Can you read that?
Yes.
Okay. So where I came from personally with Amanita, to give you some context, in 2020, I had a synchronicity where I knew that I needed to stop using cannabis. I had a really negative relationship with it. I was abusing it. It was abusing me. I had a lot of like paranoia and depression, and was like constantly smoking all the time. And somebody at this party that day, I knew I needed to quit. Like, somebody's like, have you ever microdosed Amanita? And I was like, why would I do that? That's a poisonous mushroom. And I had already been making mushroom supplements, and you know, so I knew some stuff, and I was like, this is like, why would you do that? And so, you know, nothing came from that. But then within the next month, 2 other people said, hey, I took like a high dose of Amanita. And I was like, okay, well, you're not dead, all right, so like, and you're not crazy, like, what happened? And well, not much happened during the experience, but it's been like 3 weeks, and I still have this like profound, like long, like lasting sense of peace. And I was like, okay, well, maybe there's something to this mushroom, so I'm gonna look into it some more. And I learned more and more about it, and eventually bought my own mushroom caps, and then I started making my own tea and microdosing it. And during that time, I had started to wean myself off cannabis, and I was even smoking CBD to kind of help with that. But ultimately, the thing that got me through was the Amanita, because it provided a lot of the same benefits I was looking for without the negative consequences. So whenever I microdose Amanita, I feel more relaxed, I feel more in tune with myself and whoever I'm hanging out with. I don't feel like I need to like do something. I feel satisfied. And I remembered with cannabis, it was always like, you know, 1 hour, 2 hours after I used it, I would want to go again and smoke it. And I just don't have any of that. It also helps with sleep. Really, it's really good for sleep. And not like the kind of knock you out sleep that cannabis provides, but actually like getting into like the REM sleep. And so I started to make this for myself and my family, and then eventually I started to add it in to my inventory on my business. And after that, I that just took over my life, and I quit all the other work I was doing and just like devoted my life to this mushroom. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from with this. And if anybody has any questions, you can raise your hand. So yeah, there's actually quite a bit of historical evidence for use with Amanita muscaria. There is the legend of Santa Claus, if anybody's familiar with that, around Amanita. So the legend of, well, we'll go through the mythology first. So the Soma, anybody heard of the Rig Veda or Soma? So the Rig Veda is an ancient Hindu text. It's very old, and there is a book by Gordon Wasson, who is kind of like a modern day archaeologist, who believed that this technology or this preparation or brew or plant or mushroom that they referred to called Soma was actually Amanita muscaria. He believed this because there was 3 filters that they talked about, and the first filter would be sunlight. So sunlight would dehydrate and partially decarboxylate the mushrooms to make them more safe for consumption. The second filter would be like a wool cloth, so making a tea and then actually filtering it. And then they believed the third filter was the human body. So whenever you consume Amanita tea or Amanita mushrooms, your gut will actually start to process that muscimol or the ibotenic acid into muscimol to make it more safe to eat as well. And so they believed the human body was the third filter, and there's a lot of historical evidence of people consuming their urine after they drink the Amanita tea, and I've personally done it. It does work. I had to do it for science, but yeah, it works. Yeah, you can just keep recycling it. It works with other things too, but we won't get into that. But yeah, and then there's also, so it's a theory. There's no really way to prove it. But another theory is that the Viking berserkers, people would say they would use Amanita muscaria to go into this berserking frenzy, and then go into war and just go on a rampage for 12 hours. And there's some evidence for that. I mean, I've experienced that kind of berserker rage before on super high doses. And also, I believe if they were taking Amanita, that it would be kind of like eating fresh mushrooms that are really high in ibotenic acid. I'll get into all the chemistry in a little bit, but ibotenic acid is more stimulating and energizing, and muscimol is more of that therapeutic, relaxing effect. But they probably were consuming other things like henbane or datura, because datura can also induce these multi-day long psychotic rages. And I think Amanita, if you were taking a fully decarbed brew of that, it would probably, you'd probably not want to go fight, you'd probably want to go take a nap. So there's some evidence as well in Celtic mythology, but it's more kind of like hidden clues that, maybe more philology or, kind of like stretching the truth a little bit, but it's really hard to tell, again, because the Celts, they didn't have a written language until the last 400 years of their reign. Also, the Romans had done a really good job at deleting everything except for Roman history. So, and the Celts were some of the most feared people that the Romans fought against because they were really practicing earth magic, and they were totally terrified of them. There's accounts of giant Roman armies going all the way to the British Isles and just marching back because the Druids were, in the trees, there's spirits in the trees, so they didn't mess with them. But because the Celts didn't have a written language, and because the Romans just erasing history, we don't really know. But there is a lot of Amanitas that grow in these northern European and central and southern European, but more northern and central European areas. and it would not surprise me at all if the Celts had consumed Amanita. We also have like the red speckled salmon that is a reoccurring motif in Celtic lore, and it wasn't just like this red speckled salmon that like brought them sustenance or life. It was like a salmon that would bring them to like the spirit world, and it was like really kind of psychedelic. And the symbolism behind that is like it's a red salmon with white dots, kind of like an Amanita Muscaria. Yeah, any questions so far? Alright. Yeah, then we got the magician card. So we do have actual historical use that is recorded. So the whole Santa Claus mythology is kind of hard to really pinpoint where Santa Claus came from, but there is some good evidence that the Sami reindeer herders, or reindeer followers as they like to be called, they may have been like the origin of Santa Claus, because they have a historical use of shamanic practice with Amanita Muscaria. And in the northern hemisphere of the world, we harvest Amanitas from like sometimes now until like November and December. And then they would hang these Amanitas on pine trees, and they grow under pine trees, so they have a mycorrhizal relationship with mostly spruces and white pines, and in Europe they have their own pines, and then also some hardwoods like birches. But they would hang these Amanitas to dry and maybe perhaps spread the spores a little bit. So you would, you have this, we're already building this like kind of Santa Claus image, right? So we have these pine trees with little ornaments. Also they grow under the trees like little presents, red and white gifts. And then you have a shaman who comes around on the winter solstice, which is, was it 4 days before Christmas, I believe? Because there's that standstill period between the solstice and Christmas when the sun rises, right? So in the horizon, the the winter solstice is the shortest day of the year. It's the darkest day of the year. It's winter out, and in the Sami tradition, they would have this shaman come around to each house and give people gifts, right? So, but oftentimes the doors would be snowed in, so they would have to go through not a chimney, but a giant smoke hole from the roof, and they would come in and bring people gifts, or and the gifts were Amanita, or they would, some people say they would eat the Amanita and then go to the spirit world and bring back knowledge for that person if they had like some kind of emotional, spiritual, or physical problem going on. So that's probably the origin of Santa Claus. And then also too, the Siberian people, the Koryak people, they also had a indigenous tradition using Amanita Muscaria. But the problem with that is with Russian colonialism. The Russians went into a lot of these indigenous tribes and villages, and they would basically encourage them to drink vodka instead of eat Amanitas. So if you talk to some of the people that are their ancestors were from these lineages, they would say, oh yeah, we used to use Amanita a long time ago. So it's kind of like, the same old story with colonialism in general, is that a lot of the knowledge gets lost. And but there are remnants of that, and the spirit of Amanita lives on. And yeah.
So how come you said that it was poisonous, but then people are taking doses of it?
That's a great question. So we'll get into the chemistry right now. Actually, you're right on the ball. So the chemistry, there's a lot of different compounds in Amanita. The main two we're going to talk about today are ibotenic acid and muscimol. So ibotenic acid is very present in the raw caps, and it's still present in dry caps. But there's also muscimol. So muscimol is a GABA agonist, other things that are GABA agonists are acid stimulates glutamate, so it's very stimulating. It can be energizing, it can be speedy, it can be euphoric, which may lend to that berserker theory. But it can also cause negative side effects like sweating, vomiting, I think even diarrhea, like excess salivation. But and there's also some misinformation about ibotenic acid. There's fear that it can cause brain lesioning in humans whenever it's consumed, but the studies that were done with rats were actually injected intravenously, not consumed orally. And we do know that ibotenic acid does not cross the blood-brain barrier in humans. So I think that there's actually some good side effects with ibotenic acid, and I'll get into my own use with like nibbling raw caps and taking raw in a little bit. So whenever you apply heat or you change the pH of this mushroom, you will actually convert that ibotenic acid into muscimol, which is decarboxylation, similar to like with cannabis. Whenever you have to make an edible, you have to decarb it first to make it orally active. It's the same process, just with different chemistry. Muscimol has a lot of really great therapeutic benefits, and it's been studied. It's really, like I said, it's good for anxiety. It's a GABA agonist, so like benzodiazepine drugs, kava kava, chamomile, lavender, things like that. Some side effects are, that may come with it is it can help with insomnia, it can help with depression, it can help with addiction, PTSD, and anxiety. Yeah, so I wanted to, anybody have any questions about the chemistry? Did that answer your question?
Sort of. So you said it's like better dried, like it doesn't have the same effect. Like you wouldn't just go in and nibble on a raw piece.
Well, if you wanted to avoid ibotenic acid, you would want it to be dehydrated, or you'd want to have it made into a tea. And there's a study. It's called the Austin patent, and basically you boil the caps dried for 3 hours at a pH of 3. So you'd lower the pH with citric acid. That's an edible acid, and then you would drink that. You do that at 100 degrees Celsius. Yeah, and then you would drink that. And that'd be fully decarbed, but you can also like nibble dry caps, and there's not as much ibotenic acid in them. Yeah.
Maybe people might eat raw mushroom caps with ibotenic acid because those poisonous effects can all, like throwing up, can also have cleansing effects or something of the sort.
Yeah, it can be that, right? But there can be, like, so I personally have had raw caps because they grow here in North America, and I'll explain some of the different varieties. But the yellow fly agaric grows here. It's the yellow Amanita Muscaria gisowii, or chrysoblema it's being called now. I've eaten those raw. I've eaten large amounts. I've eaten small amounts. I personally do like to have a little nibble of a raw cap, but I don't want to throw up. I've done it. Like, I've taken a large amount before, and it was not pleasant, and I had a difficult day, and then it kind of just turned into a fun day. But it was just like, it was like not super productive, but like, yeah, for ceremony, for purge, maybe, but like I wouldn't recommend that because I can't, it's just liability purposes.
But that's like why some people might.
Some people might, yeah. Some people might.
To answer like why people are eating poisonous.
Right, and a lot of people would say the poison's in the dose, right? So like, how do you define a poison? Because something that could be in a high amount making you vomit and purge, things that you may not want, but in a small amount could be like energizing, like almost like an Adderall. effect. To me, I actually really enjoyed those small nibbles. So does that answer your question? It's kind of like I can't really fully answer that.
No, you got it.
I just give you the information and
Yeah.
you can make your own decisions.
Doesn't matter what temperature you dry the caps.
Yes, that's a great question too. I have a chart that I'll show, but also it's available online, and it's also available on this Facebook group that I admin. We have a bunch of studies and information on that, but there's like a sweet spot that I'll share in a little bit.
And what were these dried at? The sweet spot?
These ones were probably dried at like 120, 140, something like that. That's usually what the guy I work with does. So I wanted to just demystify a couple of things around the toxicity. Some people will say don't eat amanitas, they're all gonna melt your liver. That's not true. It is the destroying angels, which are the Amanita bisporgyria, Amanita phalloides. There's death caps and destroying angels. Those have amatoxins. Amanita muscaria does not contain amatoxins. It's a completely other species. It's not hepatotoxic. Hepatotoxic means not toxic to the liver, so it doesn't damage your liver. Though it is a GABA agonist like kava kava and alcohol, which they do damage your liver, but Amanita muscaria does not. And then Amanita does not contain mycotoxins. Mycotoxins are exuded by mold. So no amatoxins, no mycotoxins. And I already covered the brain ibotenic acid. We're gonna just briefly go over some of the. So Amanita muscaria contains muscimol and ibotenic acid. These are not tryptamines like LSD or DMT or psilocybin. They're called isoxazoles. We do have some that are local to the northeastern U.S. where we live. Can't really see that, but it's the Amanita muscaria variation Gassaui, also known as Amanita chrysoblema. Common name is yellow fly agaric or the North American fly agaric. We do have some red amanitas that grow in the Midwest and the west of North America. They're not limited to just Europe, but they are different subspecies. So the Amanita muscaria subspecies flavivolata grows out there, and then there's also Amanita pantherina that grows in Europe, but we don't have true pantherinas here. We have pantheroids. Some of those that grow here are called Amanita velatipes and Amanita multisquamosa. Now these are like 3 to 5 times stronger in muscimol than muscaria, and they should definitely not be consumed by like a beginner. They're very strong, and they have more ibotenic acid and more muscimol. But all of the decarbing process would be the same if you're doing it right. They grow, the yellow fly agarics grow from Michigan to North Carolina and all the way up into Quebec. And their foraging season is really dependent on the weather, but you can even pick them in like June sometimes. But normally they have a heavy flush from like August to like November. And it's usually like really heavy during October. So look around your yellow pines and your spruces and maybe even some birch trees.
What about a hemlock? Would it grow near hemlock?
I don't think so.
Okay,
Yeah.
just curious.
Yep.
I have a quick question
Yeah.
as well. So they don't grow in the winter, do they? Because you said like how they hang them on the trees. Like, was that in summer or like winter? Or would they save them and then give them to people in
Yeah,
winter?
they would save them, but also during a mild winter they can grow. I've actually picked them in Pennsylvania in like December, and I've like had to scoop like snow off of them. But after it's like consistently cold, then they'll start dying out.
Once the ground freezes, basically.
Yeah, but like out west though, like I have friends in Oregon that they pick them like all winter long because like they have a milder winter, and their heavy season's like December, January. So just depends on where you're at. And then in Australia they grow like, I think it's like in the spring, so everything's backwards.
Can you pick them at all stages of growth?
Yes, you can, but that's a great question. So they're most potent right before the cap breaks the veil. So the anatomy of a mushroom, you have the stalk and you have the base, which is underneath the soil, and then you have the mycelium, which is the true organism. The mushroom is just a fruiting body, so it's akin to an apple on an apple tree. So if you kick a mushroom or if you pick a mushroom, you're not killing that organism. You're just like picking the fruit, basically. And so then you have, you work your way up. You have the stalk, and you have a cap for these mushrooms, and they have gills. They don't have pores, so the spores come out from underneath the caps. And whenever they have reached that maturity where they're starting to sporulate, they're not as potent. They just keep getting bigger and bigger, but they're not as potent. So the most potent is like right before the veil breaks. So has anybody seen a Amanita mushroom like this right here? You can see a little diagram right here. This is known as the annulus, right? Yeah, annulus. Common name is the skirt, or the ring or collar. And the annulus will form with the mushroom as it is growing, and once it starts to get bigger, then that skirt will break off from the cap, or the pore surface, and or the gill surface, and start to just hang out, and sometimes it'll fall off. But right before that, that's like the most potent. So you can still pick them when they're older, and you can certainly pick them when they're younger. Like, if you have a neighbor who's like gonna mow his lawn, you can go out and scavenge them, and because they're gonna be toast anyway. And the caps contain the most alkaloids. So the stems, you can still use them, but the caps are really the most potent. And like if you want to, start to make a microdose tea or something, it's better to start working with the caps and then incorporate the stems, unless you just like go straight stem and cap the whole way, because it can kind of get confusing and throw off your ratio and your potency. So it's kind of best to just work with the caps, but I also like incorporating the stems. And I usually do like 1/3 of weight stem to 2/3 cap. That's just my ratio, because sometimes you could pick a mushroom and you have a really thick stalk and like a little tiny cap, and then you get a bunch of those, it might throw off the potency. Another interesting thing about the anatomy of Amanitas is that, so like they have the white spores here, or the white spots, and a lot of people think that that's actually part of the cap, but the Amanitas and Muscarias, they have a universal veil, which is something not entirely unique to that species, but it basically looks like a little egg. And so they'll come out of the ground and they'll start popping out, and then the universal veil will break open and the cap will emerge, and these are just universal veil remnants. So sometimes you could find an Amanita and you're like looking at it and you're like, okay, it has like 3 concentric rings around the base, and it has this type of stalk, and the cap color looks good, and the gills look good, but it doesn't have the spots. That's probably because it had just rained, because they can get washed away. So that's something that you should know all of the characteristics when you're identifying, not just like 1 or 2, because depending on the age of the mushroom and the conditions of its growing, it could look different. So, any questions?
So you said that the most potent, right before the most potent, right before the cap breaks the veil. Is that the universal veil?
Not the universal veil. The what would it?
Partial veil.
The partial veil. Yeah.
It's the skirt
The-
before
yeah.
it falls down.
Yep. And you'll see it'll look like you can see the cap, and like you can see it's almost ready, because there's like there's like a really thin membrane, and that's the partial veil. So if you get it and you see it might be a little webby, you might be able to see the gills a little bit through there. That's like primo. So
The webbing will be over the gills.
yeah, it'll be covering it. Or if it like just came off, that's really good too. Yep. But if they're like really old and soggy and like they got bugs in them, just pass them up. Yeah, let the slugs eat them. Yep. All right, so go through. Yeah, there's a lot of information I won't be able to cover. I think my talk's over at 2:30 or 2:45.
245.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so we got the Amanita yellow flag agaric. Typically, this season is September to November. It's mycorrhizal with pine trees. The eastern white pine seems to be like, from what I've seen, its favorite. Also spruce trees that are native, and some hardwood trees. There are some lookalikes whenever you're looking for these. Amanita flaviconia, that's an edible species. Amanita praecox, Amanita flavorubens is also an edible species. Amanita parsivolvata, that is also edible. And then Amanita frostiana, I believe that also is a psychoactive Amanita, but I'm drawing a blank on praecox and frostiana, but I know the flaviconia, flavorubens, and parsivolvata are all edible and they're non-psychoactive. So, but the things you really want to look for, because I'm assuming everybody here lives in the eastern U.S., right? So if you want to go picking these and looking for them, you want to find an Amanita that it may or may not have a yellow cap. It may have a whiter cap. It may have an orange or sometimes even pink or red, depending on conditions. But the biggest thing with these is they have kind of a, oh, you can't see it. It's like a shaggy stalk. So if anybody wants to look at the slide, you can see it in better detail. But they have typically 3 concentric rings around the base, right above the soil, sometimes covered by the soil. It's kind of shaggy. It's a white stalk. You'll see a partial veil. If the partial veil has been removed, it'll be along the stem. Sometimes it'll fall off. And you'll see white spots. If there are any spots, they'll be white. If you see yellow spots, you probably have Amanita flaviconia, which is known as the yellow patches Amanita. Its universal veil is yellow. So it has yellow spots instead of white. It has white gills, and yeah. Is there anything I'm missing, Maria, on identification?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
So the white and the pinky ones, those are different varieties, sorry.
So ones that are like, you could have a yellow flag agaric that could be like kind of bleached.
Okay.
So like could be white. Also too, whenever they're really young, and they're still in their universal veil, they'll look pretty white. But one thing you can do is you can cut through it and see. But with the younger specimens, they're kind of still in that like primordia stage. So it's like, unless you're like really experienced, it's better to pass up the super young ones.
Yeah.
Also, it's good to just let them grow too. Yeah.
You know the name of the destroying angel?
Amanita phalloides, or is it Bisporturia? I always get the death cap mixed up.
Yeah, they're both technically like, but Bisporigera is like the like main name for destroying angel.
Yeah, and those ones, they have. Do you know the characteristics of it? I mean, I know they have a white stem,
Yeah.
and it's like pretty long and slender usually.
Smooth cap.
Very smooth cap.
White.
They're very white, right?
Yep.
Yeah, they're pretty
And
white. There's also like Bisporigera variants that have other colors, like a cream or like
Like
even
a
like
green.
an opalescent, but
But they're more smooth, so you're gonna
smooth
look for
cap,
smooth
what like pale
feathers.
white, skinny stem.
They don't have any veil remnants because they don't have the universal veil.
Okay.
Or maybe do they have it, but it like it's like the boot, like Caesarea.
I'm actually not sure about the veil with
Okay.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, but they look like really different.
Okay.
Like they look very
Okay, I
different.
didn't know if they were
Can't you just do like
Yeah.
a
Now,
sport?
the one that will throw you off is the Parsnip valvata.
Yeah.
That one, like,
That's gonna ask
it
you,
looks
yeah.
like a red muscaria and it grows around here, but it has a yellow stalk and it's like a shaggy yellow stalk. It has a red cap with white spots on it, but it's edible. The Flaviconia, the yellow patches, is also edible, and Flavorubens is pretty easy to tell apart. I mean, has anybody heard of a blusher mushroom? Blushers. So the blushers are like a complex of the rubescens. They have this property that's, whether they grow here or in Europe. We have a Amaryrubescens complex, which is a group of different rubescens. But they all share one characteristic. Whenever they get eaten or nibbled or like brushed against, they blush. That's why they call them blushers. Which actually, interestingly, is like niacinamide. It's like a water soluble form of niacin, and it's interesting because whenever we take niacin, we flush. So that's kind of weird. But Flavorubens is also edible. So it's like a yellow blusher, and yeah, if you see like a bunch of pink marks all over it, it's probably that.
So not blue, pink.
Pink, yeah. Yep. All right. So. Yeah, then we have, so just an overview, we have Muscaria. It grows in a lot of places in Europe, also New Zealand, Australia, Siberia. It's the most common. People call it a weedy mushroom because it just grows everywhere. People are always kicking it over. It's been growing along roadsides. We have Amanita pantherina. It's 3 to 5 times stronger in muscimol and ibotenic acid than Muscaria. We also have Amanita regalis, which is like the royal Amanita. It's slightly more potent than Muscaria. Pantherina and regalis are both brown. They're kind of hard to tell apart whenever they're dried, but if you're working with a forager who knows, that's the best way to go. Amanita persicina, or the southern peach, is growing like in Georgia and like Florida. It's not related to Muscaria. It's not a muscar. It's a muscaroid, but it's not a Muscaria. That also contains muscimol and ibotenic acid. We have our yellow flagaric here. Flavolvulvata grows on the west coast. And then we have Pantherinoides, which are like a pantheroid that is like super, super strong, and I would not recommend that. It's like way too strong.
Did you say the Gisawi has less potency than the Muscaria?
No, they actually, Gisawii, the yellow flagaric here, and Muscaria have very similar potency. Yeah. So the regalis grows in Europe, and that one's slightly more potent. Yeah. So dehydration. So there, you can't read any of that, but there's a whole chart, and it's a lab study. So like you could dehydrate them like really high temperatures and like remove a lot of the ibotenic acid, but you're also going to there's an oxidation, process that happens, and you lose the overall muscimol. And then you can dehydrate them very low, but they'll have a lot of ibotenic acid and muscimol still. So my sweet spot is like 120 to 140 degrees. And if you look at this chart, I'm happy to share this chart with anybody, or you can go online. The 122 to 140 for me was like the sweet spot, because whenever I do my extraction process to make the tinctures, I'm decarbing it anyway. So my idea was like use as little heat as I can, but just enough, and then do the full decarb later. Because you can't fully decarb, like there's a lot of people that say like, oh, I have fully decarbed mushroom caps. You can't really do that unless you're just like cooking the heck out of them. There's like, it's better to do it in the water tea process. Yeah. So if you've picked your Amanitas, you've identified them safely, you can leave your whole caps whole, or if they're really big, you can cut them in half. You can slice the stems in half. You can keep the stems too, just cut the dirt off, and then you can dehydrate them all. 120 to 140 degrees. I think I usually do probably about 12 hours. and depending on how big they are, you might need to do a little longer. So, yeah, raw is not recommended, but if you're experienced and you're working with this mushroom, then you know, do what feels right, but just be safe about it. I've eaten like a large amount of raw, and it was like I was like vomiting, and it was not fun. But I did have a good day. Yes.
So you said that the Amanita can be compared to like a benzo.
Mm-hmm.
So would it also then possibly create some of the emotional instability that benzos can sometimes create?
That's a good question. I personally don't see that as much, except for like in the high doses. It seems to be like a diminishing return whenever you're taking too much of it too frequently. But I'm talking like 7 grams as a dose rather than like a quarter of a gram or something, which is what I would do for like a microdose. So I think like some people may go on and off Amanita, like they might typically take it like 5 days on, 2 days off, and then maybe they like stop taking it for like a couple weeks or a month, and then they come back to it. So that's you know, I think whenever you're taking like super high doses, you're just blasting your GABA receptors, and then you'd have something like that. But it's not as common as with benzos, because benzos are doing a whole other thing to the brain that not only is the withdrawal dangerous and potentially lethal, but then there's like withdrawal symptoms and there's like damage.
And there's no addictive properties to it.
No, Amanita is totally non-addictive. You can just stop taking it completely and it's totally fine. I actually, with a lot of work I do with consultations and clients, I help people get off of benzodiazepines with Amanita. So they taper on the Amanita while they're tapering off of the benzos,
Yeah.
and that's a very long process, but there's a lot of people who have success with it. So let's say you have your Amanitas, you dehydrated them, you want to make something with them. So you could powderize them and consume them that way if you wanted. You can make a tea. You could do a full decarb or a partial decarb. You can actually smoke or vape the dried mushrooms or like a resin. You can also make tinctures, oil infusions, and salves for topical pain relief. So it's really good like as a compress. Like you could just make an alcohol tincture or an oil infusion and put it on your achy bones, your joints. I use it for my carpal tunnel syndrome. And it really helps too with my Lyme disease fatigue. So it's just about as versatile as cannabis. It's just a mushroom.
What's the amount of a microdose or whatever you're speaking of dosage?
That is a perfect question for the next slide.
I can't see
You're right
that.
on. You're
I
right
can't
on
see
it.
that.
You're right on it. So I'm going to go over dosage and experience. So microdoses, it's not like psilocybin or other mushrooms or plants. It has a very broad range. It's kind of hard to tell somebody how much to take, but I usually start off people with like 100 milligrams. Very small, but some people will go up to 1 gram. Microdoses can be as low as 50 milligrams and all the way up to like 3 or 4 grams. It just depends on the age of the mushrooms, how they were prepared, your brain chemistry. You know, there's a lot of variables. That's why it's better to start low, go slow, and work your way up until you find your sweet spot.
And they deteriorate over time. I'm assuming.
Yeah, they do. They seem to. There's some speculation on that, and there's like new studies coming out about like how to preserve them and like how to store them. Some people say freeze them. Some people say room temperature is best. But it does seem that like after 12 months of like storage that they start to lose potency. But every 12 months they're ready to harvest again. So yeah. But yeah, so some of the effects you might experience for a microdose. So you're gonna have mild anxiolytic effects. So it's helping reduce anxiety. It's gonna increase creativity. It will help you have relief from depression, lethargy. It helps reduce mental chatter and noise. And it also can provide relief from addictions of all sorts. I've helped people get off of cannabis, SSRIs, even opiates. And I think it's interesting because they all have different pathways, but the muscimol and muscaria in general is just kind of helping people feel at ease, which a lot of times people just want to feel good, right? They just want to feel at ease, and they just went to this one or that one, and Amanita can help them get off of those and not have the negative side effects.
How is it with caffeine
Like taken with caffeine?
or getting off caffeine?
I don't know. I like caffeine, so
I do too.
yeah.
I guess
I would
that might
recommend-
keep more ibotenic acid in it. You can use it as a stimulant.
I was gonna say that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's other things too we could talk about with caffeine and adrenal fatigue.
Right.
Like you could be taking other things that would also work with Amanita.
Okay.
But some people actually say it gives them a bit of a lift, but I don't know. Just depends. Some people it makes them tired. So yeah.
You said that it helps with Lyme disease fatigue.
Yeah.
That's internal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Taken internally. Also, I mean, I do. If I don't take my knotweed regularly, I'll have my like joint flare-ups, and I will apply the salve, the Amanita salve I made to those areas, and it will help. But that's just temporal. You know, it's really just numbing the pain, kind of. So yeah, then go ahead. Do you have a question? Okay. The threshold dose is what I.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Do you need a tolerance break with this? With like how psilocybin is?
Yeah, that does seem to happen. There's some people have like different theories on this. Like some people say it's sort of like a reverse tolerance. Like the more you take it, the less you need to achieve the same effect. I don't really know if that's been verified or if that's more anecdotal. But I do find myself like I'll take it like 5 days on, 2 days off, or like every other day, and then I'll take a break for a little while. You know, like sometimes like a month, and I'm like, you know what? I think I could go for some Amanita, and I'll do a little regimen again. Yeah, some people go on 3 weeks straight and then 1 week off. But I think really the best thing to do is to tap into your body and your intuition. For some people that are really cerebral, that's hard. So that's why I give them like a protocol. You know? So the threshold dose is kind of what I think is the sweet spot. So that could be anywhere from 2 grams to 15 grams. That's a huge range.
Wow.
It's not like psilocybin. And if they were freshly dehydrated and picked, then I would say like go on the lower end because they're going to be really freaking strong. And also don't really work with the threshold doses until you've been microdosing for a while. It's like really with this mushroom, it's baby steps, and also you got to be scientific about it. You know, a mushroom you pick right here and one right here could be 10 times stronger or weaker. So whenever you're making a preparation, it's good to take a large batch of mushrooms, grind them up, and then make a big tea broth or something, and then you could filter that out and like make it into microdose ice cubes. So that's how I started, was just microdosing tiny little ice cubes, and that way I had the same batch, had the same preparation, the same mushrooms, and I knew what 1 + 1 would do rather than 1 plus I don't know what this next batch is like. So yeah, with the threshold doses, you can have some time distortion, euphoria, feeling some size distortion, feeling uninhibited, unguarded, ability to move through major trauma accompanied by mindfulness or other practices, so like breath work and yoga and dance. And you do have, I would not be operating heavy machinery or driving at this point. You could probably do it, but it wouldn't be safe, and it probably wouldn't be fun either. No, the major thing is you can heal. You can start to really heal PTSD in these doses. You can do that on a microdose level if you're also working with other modalities, but the threshold dose gets you gets your foot more in the door. And the cool thing about working with this mushroom is that because it's a GABA agonist, it's working on the fight or flight response in the body, and it helps to suppress that. And whenever you have PTSD, you have an overactive fight or flight response. So, if say you were abused by somebody who always wore blue shirts, and then you see somebody with a blue shirt, and you like get triggered by that person, it's just the brain is like trying to protect this body because that's like where it's at, and the blue shirt was bad, and so we can actually disable some of that stuff temporarily. Now, it is important to have that system. There's a reason for it, for us to survive. But whenever our survival mechanism is kicked into hyperdrive, then we're living in trauma and fear. So by disabling that temporarily, we don't have that physiological response to that memory, which was caused by a stimulus of seeing the blue shirt, right? And then we can actually step off of that cycle of trauma and onto a new timeline of not being that traumatized person anymore, because there is a way through now. Amanita kind of just helps us open that doorway. Now with the heroic doses, those are like 15, 20, 30, 60 grams plus. These are definitely not recommended. This is like deep shamanic work. If you decide to do this, you should probably have been working with Amanita for quite a while, and you should have somebody that's not just familiar with sitting with people, but specifically with Amanita, because you can lose coordination, you could fall over, you could run out into the street. You can actually not really know if you're dreaming or if it's real life. It's very disorienting. You can have drug-induced psychosis with this. I have personally experienced this, on all ends of the spectrum, and I wouldn't recommend that. That's something that is like very, very danger territory. But also you can do a lot of really great work, but at what cost, right? I think the biggest thing with these for me as like an herbal practitioner is harm reduction is the top priority. And if somebody's not willing to go slow, it's kind of like, well, you need that lesson anyway. So like, let's start small and work our way up. Yeah. Yes.
Have you ever mixed psilocybin and Amanita?
In microdoses, yes. Yeah, and actually I might be talking about that next. Oh, look at that! Look at that! She is on it. So I made this. You can't see it. It says the red pill or the blue pill. It's like psilocybin brews is blue with the psilocybin content, or you have the red pill, Amanita. And so in the microdose, they can provide very similar effects in different ways for different people. I personally don't like psilocybin as much as a microdose because it's kind of too stimulating for me. It can actually cause anxiety, and I find that a lot of clients are like, I wanted to microdose mushrooms and I tried this, but like I feel more anxious or emotional, and I'm just like trying to like work at my job, and I'm like crying. And it's like, yeah, maybe try Amanita, because the way I feel like psilocybin works energetically, it's different for everybody, but psilocybin's like, hey, here's your trauma, like, check it out. Like, it's more like, like kind of aggressive, and Amanita's like, hey, this thing happened, and if you want to work through it, it's right here. And you're over here, and it's over here. So, like, it's not even you, you're like separate from your experiences, so like, take a look at this if you want. And that's why I think the Amanita can be better for some people. I'm just very sensitive to things, so that's why I work better with Amanita. The obvious concern about legality comes into play with psilocybin. Amanita Muscaria is totally unregulated. It's completely legal, and the only state it's illegal in is like Louisiana, but you can have it for ornamental purposes. So just don't let a cop see you eating one. You can drive around with a whole carload of Amanitas. Just don't be eating them. Amanita is typically more gentle, and psilocybin can be a little more stimulating.
I forgot psilocybin's not legal everywhere.
Right.
Where it is.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
right. So, yeah, I wish they were both legal because it's silly. People should be able to take their own medicine. So, yeah, GABA suspends the fight-or-flight response system, so it can actually help you get deeper into a parasympathetic response. And psilocybin can kind of like aggravate that and like get you into the sympathetic response sometimes, but then like you work through that and then you're like, okay, but like, did I really want to do that? Not always. So and then I talk about the holy trinity of fungal nootropics, so it's lion's mane, psilocybin, and muscaria together. So all three of these have neuro benefits. So we have neurogenesis with lion's mane, neuroplasticity with psilocybin, and neuroprotection with muscimol. So my whole theory was like, let's make some new pathways in the brain and protect them. So studies with lion's mane with neurogenesis have been done, and then on rats, and then they expose those neurons to oxidation, and the neurons die back, which we're bombarded by oxidation and toxins. So people say take lion's mane and psilocybin together because psilocybin helps us create new pathways, right? So old trauma pathways, or I don't like to put my clothes away pathways, like we can like make new ones. But with oxidation, those pathways die back. So my personal theory was like, let's take Amanita too, because that is a neuroprotectant. So it protects the myelin sheath that protects the axons between the neurons. And a starting dose for that I would recommend is lion's mane is 100 to 500 milligrams in an extracted form. Psilocybin 100 milligrams, not 100. And Amanita Muscaria 100 to 500 milligrams. But as always, I work with one thing at a time and then incorporate them slowly.
See, I wish I knew you back in 2019 because I had major brain trauma.
Okay.
And actually did rebuild my brain back with lion's mane and psilocybin, but no Amanita because I didn't know about it.
Yeah. Yep.
I was gonna say I won't say cured, but I got out of OCD, intrusive thought psychosis with psilocybin.
Wow.
And then I recommended it to people and been like, but you have to feel what you're feeling when you feel it, and you have to work through it. Otherwise, you're just gonna be in a state of anxiety.
Right.
And so this, for like at least half of the people that I recommended psilocybin to would benefit from this. 'Cause
Yeah.
they gave it up because it was just, it's too much.
Right. And it's like sometimes it's like, you work through it, and it's like, sometimes it just aggravates that, right? It's like, I do yoga and now my neck hurts, but like I should do more yoga. It's like, well, actually, maybe you should do different yoga.
And I was going to say with that, with the psilocybin, sometimes you go through that big hurdle and you work through that, and then you don't even know what it was.
Right.
When you're done, you're like.
Well, a lot of. I mean, yes, there's real trauma, but a lot of times, for me at least, like I make my own problems. I make up my own problems, but now a cool thing is you can take Amanita before a psilocybin journey to kind of ease into it. Or I actually work with a doctor who recommends my products to people, and he will actually guide people through like a 6 or 7 gram psilocybin journey, and then like at the tail end of it, dose them with Amanita to kind of like smooth it out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yep.
That makes sense.
But that would obviously be with a shaman or a doctor. Now I'm actually out of time. I don't know until somebody kicks me out. Just keep talking if you guys want.
Yeah.
But I'll try to slide through this is the last part. So Amanita Muscaria today, like we've gone through all this, but like what's going on today? Just to be frank, there's a lot of bullshit out there. There's a lot of really, really bad products that don't even contain Amanita, They don't even contain muscimol. Some of them do, but a lot of them contain synthetic tryptamines, synthetic cannabinoids. So 4-ACO-DMT, synthetic psilocybin. Also, some of them have contained synthetic versions of the kava lactone, so from kava, or metrogenine, which I believe is from not Kana, but kratom, right?
Kratom.
Yeah, and kratom or kratom, and so if you see anything in a head shop or if you see anything in a gas station, don't buy it. That's like the long and short of it. Like there's, like if you buy your gasoline there, don't buy food and don't buy medicine. That's my rule of thumb. Like, you know, there'll be like gummies with like really trippy kind of like holographic, you know, like Amanita trippy gummies, or like trippy, yeah. It's like they just look really bad. I used to supply one of them before I realized what was going on, and then I quit working with them, and then later we had actually worked with a lab, third-party tested $35,000 worth of lab tests, and like found a lot of things in there that were not muscimol, and so there's a lot of fear that like this might invoke regulation. Recently, there was a company called Diamond Shrooms, and they said they had like muscimol gummies, and the FDA did a test on them. They didn't verify if they had muscimol or not, but they did find like 4 other compounds that were psychedelic. There's a potential death, multiple hospitalizations, and that's why it's
been in the news.
Yep, Diamond Shrooms has been in the news recently. The FDA is basically looking into all Amanita gummies. It's kind of a wild west right now. And the problem is it's all the companies that work with CBD. So the CBD is like, you know, they go CBD, and then the next thing is Blue Lotus, and then the next thing is Kava, and then Kana, and then Kratom, and now it's Amanita. It's just the next legal high, and you know, Amanita is not really like that, so they like try to goose it up a little bit by like throwing in like synthetic psilocybin and like weed and like kava and kana. And the problem is nobody really knows what it's like. So they're like, oh, I took these gummies and I was like, you know, everything was wiggling, and I'm like, that wasn't Amanita. You know, it just doesn't happen. Amanita is more of a somatic effect. Now, when you're in those heroic doses, like, yeah, you can see all sorts of shit. Like, I've gone to other dimensions, yeah, this is just, you can't see it, but we tested their products with a lab, and they had psilocybin, psilocin, no ibotenic acid, no muscimol. So where do you buy Amanitas? Well, obviously, I am a vendor here, but if you don't want to buy it from me, I am an admin in this Facebook group called the Amanita Muscaria Science and Magic Group. We are the biggest resource on Amanita, and honestly the best online forum. We have like almost 100,000 members. We have a trusted, vetted vendor list that goes by country, so we have international vendors from around the world. And these are all people that our admin team has vetted. We have really great resources too. We have tons of lab reports and studies. We have a whole beginner's guide if you want to read it. Also too, another great book if you like to read is this book. I sell these at my booth down there. Also, you can buy it on Amazon, or you can buy it from get directly from the author Kevin Feeney. He's a good colleague of mine, and he'll actually be working with me on a masterclass that I'll be creating. So something I'm working with right now is a group of other professionals, colleagues that work with Amanita, doctors and herbalists and authors and lawyers, to kind of create a video series package. So it'll be like a premium content, subscription based, chapter by chapter through different things, a lot of the things I've talked about today, but like in deeper detail. Also, you get access to like discounted prices on my products, and then we'll do a monthly integration meeting on Zoom. We can talk about anything. So yeah, in conclusion, I think that Amanita really kind of demands respect. Whenever she is not respected. Yeah, like bad things happen, but it's really a lot of times it's like purging that whatever emotional ego thing that needed to go went. And like, you know, like all good medicine, it's really good to take your time and be patient. And some people, like Terrence McKenna, if anybody's familiar with him, he took Amanita and was like, like gave me a headache, like nothing really happened. And I think, you know, coming from like the psilocybin world where like things really hit you and like you've noticed the effects and like you see the visual cortex changing and everything, Amanita is not really like that. It's more somatic. It's more emotional. It's more spiritual. It's happening, and there's things happening like in the background. And a lot of that stuff is like the trauma that we didn't work through in our childhood. So preparation, information is key, patience. And I do believe that Amanita is kind of making a revival now. This is a super ancient medicine that's been used for thousands of years. But I think it's kind of making a revival now because we have a very traumatized culture. And I think that this mushroom, as well as many other plant allies and mushroom allies, can help us work through some of that trauma. So yeah, that's basically it. I could go on forever, but thank you guys for your time.
One last tiny question.
Yes.
It's that so Amanita will make my stomach hurt, like how psilocybin does?
So same kind of like talk with like psilocybin. Some people that have issues, stomach issues, they'll make a tea out of psilocybin.
Yeah.
Same thing with Amanita. A lot of times it's just like the chitin, which is cellulose kind of, you know, it's the same compound that's in crustaceans. It's present in a lot of mushrooms. So if you want to consume the benefits without the mushroom material, you make a tea.
And how exactly do I make this tea most potent?
So you can boil the caps in water. If you just want to have it like not fully decarbed, like 15 minutes. That's all you need. Just boil them.
Raw caps?
Well, I would
These
do
caps
dried.
You do
like
dry.
this.
Yeah.
Cap.
These.
How much water would you use?
Well, the amount of water and the amount of mushrooms you use depends on what your desired effect would be. So if you wanted to microdose it, you know, you would have to have it more water and less mushrooms, and like, you know, there's ways to calculate all that. But the biggest thing you want to do is you want to weigh whatever you're working with first, and then the volume, you can divide that by the weight, and then you say, okay, I have this many caps for this much water. That means if I take 1 ounce of this, I'm getting this much, right?
Just really experiment and see how it is.
Yeah, and like really, I would say like a good microdose to start with if you want to make tea is like 100 milligrams, 200 milligrams, like it's pretty small. A lot of people, they may start with more, but I think that I have some people that they take 60 milligrams. I've had people quit benzodiazepines on 60 milligrams. So, but I've also had people quit them on like, you know, 5 grams a day, you know, so it depends on who you are and what you need and how it affects you. Yeah, but it's best to really, if you're gonna take more than like a microdose, it's best to get a large amount, even an ounce, grind them all up and work with a homogenized batch. So you don't end up with like a weak dose or a hot dose.
And then the next day you're on something totally different.
Yeah, and then because you don't really have like a baseline at that point. So, because you can always freeze the tea and then work with it. Yeah. I had these little perfectly shaped little hearts. They were like silicone molds, and they would hold exactly 1 milliliter. And so I'd measure, and it ended up being like 66 milligrams per heart. And I would just take one and work with it like that. Yeah. So, thank you guys. Yep.
Describe how your